So go ahead, Daniel. Hi, how are you?
Thank you so much, Tracy, and honored to be supporting the Coalition for Schools Educating Mindfully. Definitely, and it's one of those things that I think has needed to happen for a long time, and I'm so happy that you're doing it. It's one of those ones that I was like, I this should happen. Maybe I should do it, but probably somebody better at it than me will step in. We each need to play the exact role which fits, and so it's amazing with all of you out there. I'm sure that you're all somebody typed in that they're the peace educator at their school, and each of you, I'm sure, are doing amazing work. We have to be a coalition educating mindfully together, as we say. Um, so thank you for tuning in tonight. And I really want, when Tracy asked me if I'd be interested in doing this, one thing that I responded to is right now I'm not actually doing that much teaching, but when I am teaching, I'm really interested in not just doing the mindfulness and education talk. I really want to be talking about what's happening in our world, and of course how mindfulness and social emotional learning can support this, but also really looking at uh, ecology and racial injustice and all of the different aspects that we are all experiencing in different ways and have different feelings about. But in what ways can we transform our educational systems more consciously to be able to live into the world we all want for ourselves and our kids? And some of that, mindfulness is this profound tool on its surface of relaxing us, keeping us calm in the chaos, which we need really badly. But at its deepest level, it's a very radical practice. It makes us profoundly question our own awareness, our own thoughts, and also question the systems that we live in. So for me, it's really necessary right now. What I'm going to go into in a little bit is what I call the 3 R's of mindfulness. And the first of those is around regulation, relaxation, around what we all and what our kids need in the midst of a pandemic and social unrest. I like to think about this year 2020 as like 2020 vision. All of a sudden our eyes are opening up and seeing things really clearly and intensely. I personally, I'm in New York at the moment, though I live in California, and I'm in New York because the threat of getting on a plane was less than living. I've got a 10-month-old baby, and we were living in really toxic smoke, and there was a massive fire 5 miles from our house. And, we needed to make big decisions. And I think we're all needing to make big decisions right now around opening our eyes to what's happening in our world in a way that sometimes we can be asleep to until they knock on our door or they're burning 5 miles down the road. So in this way, the question of how is mindfulness not just a regulating tool, just like let us calm down in the midst of the chaos? How is it a way for us to open our eyes and to fight and be awake and work together in a very potent and timely way? So I'll explain how I really believe mindfulness and social emotional learning are that, but we need to claim it. So that's a bunch of talking. I really want tonight to be able to. I'm going to be talking some and explaining some things, but I also really want to have some collaborative discussion, and I want to have some experiential discussion, and I want to do some practice. So I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to do some mindfulness practice in a moment. But I just want to start with explaining this idea of the 3 R's of mindfulness. The first being regulation. I'm assuming that each of you has had your own stressors. If you're not, I don't know. You could tell me how you're doing that. But I would actually love for you to maybe just type into the chat bar what have you been doing right now and in the last 6 months to work with the stresses of, teaching with kids at home, or your own anxiety, or all of the stresses that we have. What have been your practices? And sometimes, sitting practicing mindfulness is great, but maybe you're going in the garden, maybe you're taking walks, maybe you're tell us what you're doing. Maybe you're doing Wim Hof breathing or something. What's your method? And I'm gonna check. Oop. My, I've just, okay, stop share. You've gotten to see forward on my share. I would just love to see some chats of what are you doing. Creating art, gardening. Started practicing tangle drawing. I gotta check that out. Lots more walks, walking, morning gratitude, time in nature, bike rides, fun movie night. For me, it's really important when we're talking about mindfulness to recognize how mindfulness in its mindfulness-based stress reduction form, which is profound, is a very narrow understanding of mindfulness, right? For me, time in nature is mindfulness par excellence. Art, creativity, taking walks, teaching group fitness, taking dance. All of these things are profound meditations, things that get us into our body, into our hearts. And every single culture has different forms of basically mindfulness being how are we becoming present in this moment, in our bodies, in our emotions, in our awareness, to what's around us, to what's inside of us. And there's a million ways to do that. And so it's easy for us to get stuck in a cultural idea of what that means, or a specific idea. And I was in Germany a little while ago, and I actually I got to teach with John Kabat-Zinn a thing about mindfulness and education, and he had to leave early. And somebody after he left asked me when I was trained in mindfulness-based stress reduction, and I said, actually, I've never been trained in it. And they were all shocked. In Germany, like, if you have to do MBSR in order to be a mindfulness teacher, they were shocked, and they were like, how can you teach mindfulness without that? And I was tried to explain that mindfulness looks a million different ways. Obviously, John had the supports me enough to have been teaching with me. We can look a lot of different ways, and it's really important to understand for each of us to teach from our own presence, for us to practice whatever speaks to us. So what I would love for us to do is to start again with our own practice. I'm going to share this screen again and try to go back. Sorry. So how here are you right now? What do you need to be more here? This is a practice I very often do with students, and it's on some level a regulation practice, because we're trying to corral our awareness back into our bodies. When we're doing the quick pace technology Zoom world we're in, often we don't even know that we have disappeared. And for me, it's always, do I know what my body feels like? So let's take a moment. I'm going to ask these questions, and I'm going to actually ask you to go into a little breakout just with one other person afterwards, just to answer this question: how here are you right now? And what do you need to be more here? I do this with students often, and they often give like a percentage. It's like, I'm about 20% here right now. Some will say 90%. And then, what's helpful is, for me, I always ask them, you can say, why are you here right now? And you can actually say why. So you can say, I'm 20% here right now because my kid's in the other room and they're making a mess. I know it. And I'm trying to breathe. I'm trying to become more here. And you might say, the other person would say to you, what do you need to be more here? And you might say, I'm actually going to take a minute and just go in and check and make sure everything's fine in there, and tell them to, please mindfully be a little more quiet. Or whatever, I need to take a breath, or I need to do some of my vacuum breaths, or whatever it is that I need to do to become more present. It's amazing for me when I do this in a classroom, because I'll have, a bunch of kids saying, yeah, I'm 80, 90%. And then there'll be a few kids saying, I'm 10% present because I didn't sleep last night, because my dad was sick, and and for me all of a sudden I'm like, wow, how could I have gone through this class without knowing what was going on with this kid? And I would have been like annoyed that they weren't paying attention when really, oh yeah, of course they're not able to pay attention right now. So it's actually reading the attentional space in the room, so you can be really attentive to what's needed, and they can actually self-regulate by asking for what they need, because they might say, yeah, before we start, can I go sit for a moment or take a walk? So let's all find a comfortable position, and we'll just practice for a few minutes. Um, and you're going to be asking yourself this question: how here am I right now? If it's comfortable for you, you can let your eyes close. And just see if you can ask yourself this question: how here am I right now? How present am I in my body? How present am I to my emotions? How aware am I of how I feel? How present am I to my breath? How do you even know that you're breathing? How do you know that you're breathing? How present am I to the sounds and temperature and the sensory data that's coming into my awareness? And see if you can just let your awareness be very open. And as much as possible, just see if you can rest into your body, rest into your emotions, rest into the sensations around you. And simultaneously notice how often your mind pulls you out. See if you can anchor your awareness in your breath and your body, in the physical experience. And it's completely fine if the mind jumps away. Maybe you're 90% distracted and only 10% able to rest in your body. And that's fine. Just see if you can be aware of that. Every time you touch down back into the body, see if you can kind of rest in it for a moment and extend it. And then when the mind pops out, just see if you can notice it again and again. And see if you can rest into whatever is in the body. There might be emotions that are uncomfortable, there might be tension, pain, there might be happiness. You might smell things, you might taste things. See if you can just rest into it, like soaking into a hot tub. And as you do that, you might be able to track your attention percentage changing. Maybe you're 20 or 30% resting present in the body. Maybe you're 90%. It's not a competition. You're trying to welcome yourself home to the body, home to your heart, home to your senses. And if there's any part of you that keeps getting distracted, keeps jumping away, maybe there's a tension or a stress, see if you can kind of turn towards that part of yourself, the part of you that maybe is fidgety, maybe doesn't want to be sitting here. And see if you can ask that part of yourself, what do you need in order to, to let me be present for this call tonight? What would help to have you relax more? And see if this part of you can answer. What does this fidgety part need? The stressed parts, the distracted parts? maybe a glass of water. Maybe they just want your attention. Maybe they're willing to just sit on the sidelines for a moment. You're like, hey, do you mind just sit to the side? I'll get back to you, I promise. And see if you can ask this part of you what it needs, and if it can gently sit to the side with your promise that you'll get back to it. And just taking a few more breaths, seeing if you can rest into the body, into awareness. Let's take one more big inhale together. Nice big sigh on the exhale. Thank you all for that practice. So I know we're on Facebook Live, so Facebook Live folks are going to just maybe need to practice this themselves as we do it. But what I would love to do is a short little breakout session where we're just going to go for 5 minutes out. And in that time, you're just going to be with one other person. And Tracy, if you could do that for me, if you could make just dyads. And what I want you to do in that session is you're going to say to the person that you're with, you're going to say so my example would be, I'm actually feeling about 95% present right now. I've got maybe a little 5%. I hear my little 10-month-old squealing out the window with his grandma and my wife. So it's a kind of happy distraction. And maybe a tiny sliver, 1% of tech trying to figure out if, how to work the PowerPoint with this or something like that. Little distraction. But I think I'm good. And so that's what you do. You say, how present am I? 10%, 90%, 50%, maybe what's missing. And then you could say, what I was getting that I might need is to take a few more breaths to be here, or whatever it is. And then the other person can share for a couple minutes. And then you can, if there's extra time, you can just chat with each other about this practice. The experience of just asking myself and then communicating with somebody else about how present I am usually helps that percentage go up. So it's kind of a secret tactic. So I'm going to talk about these 3 R's of mindfulness, starting at the kind of the root level, the basement level, which is regulation. I'm going to just show this for a moment. So this is the window of tolerance, and it's talked about often in psychology. Often people talk about it as hyperarousal and hypoarousal. So hyperarousal being when people are hyper, right? When the kids in the class are bouncing off the walls, or when you are trying to practice mindfulness and your mind is really scattered. And then hypoarousal is when the student is kind of zonked out and kind of staring down at the desk, is spacing out, is not able to focus. Or if you're practicing mindfulness, you might notice sometimes you do this thing where you're like, trying to practice but falling asleep. Sometimes that's just because you're tired. But sometimes it's also when we practice mindfulness, there's so much inside that we kind of have a little shut-off valve. We kind of turn ourselves off from what's happening. So there's the idea with mindfulness, oftentimes we think about it as if we're just trying to get ourselves to relax. But really this idea of the window of tolerance is in learning, for neuroscience, when we're trying to learn. That window of tolerance is if you're really stressed, and I often do it as a stress thermometer. If you're up at like an 8, 9, 10 on the stress thermometer, there's so much anxiousness, worry, rumination in the mind that we can't focus, right? There's too much. And then when we're down at the 3, 2, 1, the hypoarousal, we're so kind of out of it. That's kind of where you get more kind of depression and feeling. We can't focus then either. So the point, and usually the good part of the downscale is being relaxed. The good part of the upscale is being alert, right? And being relaxed and alert are both profoundly important for learning, for life, for practicing mindfulness. In mindfulness practice, those are actually the two profound aspects of deep meditation. So in a very deep meditation, what you'll find is the alertness, or what often is called clarity, right? When there's kind of like this sparkling presence, right? And then that sense of relaxedness or openness, which is this sense of being just kind of wide open to whatever is. Sometimes it's called even emptiness, which I don't exactly like using that word. But it's this sense of not being attached to exactly what's happening. There's just this, like, you're so relaxed, you're just open to everything, right? When you're too open to everything, it's kind of slothful, right? So you're trying to find this window of tolerance. You're trying to relax and be open while having this kind of sparkling clarity at the same time. So we're actually looking to be in the middle range there. But first, what I find, and why I begin with regulation, is that usually in American culture, in a lot of modern culture around the world, we are mostly up, right? There's a lot of hyper. Our technology, the pace of work, it's all do, right? You all know what I'm talking about. So most of us live up on that 7, 8, 9 scale. And I've gone around the world teaching this, and I do this thing where I tell people, if you are to rank yourself on that scale, and stand up with your arms like this if you're at like a 10, and sit slouched in your chair if you're at a 0. And around the world, every place, I mean, I've taught a lot in Europe and some in Central America and different places, that pretty much everybody does this, right? Like all over the place, we're way up. So usually the teaching, both in classrooms and for you as teachers and for leaders that I work with, the beginning practice is this kind of drawing down, right? This relaxing practice. As a side, but not a total side, ecologically, there's all the discussion about drawing down carbon. I think it's actually profoundly connected, right? What do we need to do in order to heal our earth too, is we need to slow everything down, stop flying everywhere so much, stop doing everything so much. There's a deep healing for our bodies and for our global systems in a sense of slow down, draw down, right? So we begin with that, and so often, and I have a kid's book that I have out called Alpha Breaths, which there's Alpha Breaths 2 coming out soon also. This 3 sounds true. And we can do some of these breaths together, and there's, A through Z, different types of practices. So a lot of these, for kids, we need to gamify the practice. I talk about playing attention rather than paying attention, right? Just going into a classroom and saying, let's all sit down and be quiet, feels a lot like that game that kids know is not a game, where we tell them to be quiet as long as they can, right? We want to have this be fun, right? We want to teach them that what mindfulness truly is being more in touch with who they are, right? And everybody wants that. So let's do some of these, if you'll do them with me, please. If you be a 4-year-old. Put your arms out like an alligator and breathe in and breathe out. Let's do another of those. And then some butterfly breaths. Open your arms. Okay, so we could do that. Maybe we should just do that all night, right? Elevator breath, ice breath, all types of breaths. My colleague Chris Willard and I put this together. And it's really important to do these practices first. What I find in the pandemic, for example, there's so much, trying to work with kids on a screen like this, as I'm trying to talk with you, to be able to try to get kids to be able to settle and pay attention. There's so much energy trying to lock your attention on the screen, and the stress for parents, for kids, for everybody of trying to be able to. I found that for myself when the pandemic started, and then when the crazy fires started where I live, I've been practicing mindfulness for 20 years. I do this regularly. I teach this, and I was up at an 8 or a 9 and really struggling. And I really needed, before we get to what are the next, we're going to get to resilience, and then what I think of as realization. Um, Before we get to those next level practice of mindfulness, first for myself, it was like I wasn't going to get on here and give a mindfulness talk, or I wasn't going to try to write a book on this or something. I just needed to, like I needed to put the mask on first. I needed to breathe. I needed to do what I do is the vacuum cleaner breath, which I often teach kids, which is this being aware of stress, bringing it down into my belly, holding it there for a few seconds, letting it go. I needed to find myself at least down to a 6 or something, 7 or 6, to be able to be the center of the storm, to be calm for my baby, for my wife, for my community. So this is why we always begin with regulation. And it's on some level the most important thing, because most of us are not in that optimal zone, right? Whether you're on the hypo, and there's different practices for hypo and hyper, right? I'm talking right now about these drawdown practices because most of us, that's where we're at. We need to bring ourselves down. If there's more of the hypo, there's more practices like a breathing practices becomes more like a yogic breathing practice where you're like you're bringing in the energy, or you're needing to do some calisthenics, or you're needing to do all types of really beautiful practices to bring the energy up so you can find yourself in that optimal zone to be able to take care of yourself and to take care of others. At any point, please, I'm going to check right now. Please chat in and ask any questions. I'm going to leave a bunch of room for questions, but if you have any questions or comments, please let me know. Here's the little picture of the vacuum cleaner breath. Vacuum cleaner breath is one of my favorites. Kids really like to use it. It's a drawdown practice. It's a practice where you're being aware, doing what we started with, be aware of the stress. Usually we're not even aware of the stress, so the first practice has to be stop and notice, how here am I? Why am I not here? Oh, my mind's spinning, my shoulders are tight. Okay, let's try to bring it down, hold it in the belly a few seconds, breathe it out. Kids, this works very well for kids. The whole thing with regulation is we spend a lot of time in classrooms trying to regulate our kids. Right? You notice them when they're up at an 8 or a 9, and then you have to spend a lot of energy doing whatever you do, whether it's a mindfulness practice or whether you're doing an old school send them to the principal or something. You're spending that energy regulating them. What we're doing is trying to teach them to track, to notice when they're up at a 7 or an 8, and then to give them a vacuum cleaner breath, some type of stress toy, so they notice it and they can self-regulate. So in schools and classrooms where I do this, teachers always are saying to me, oh yeah, I can tell. All of a sudden I'll look over and a student is doing something, right? And obviously they've caught themselves as they're going up, and obviously they want to be able to do it. They don't want to act out. You don't want them to act out. We want to teach them, and you don't teach them this when they're at an 8 or a 9, right? It doesn't help if they're already up there. You teach them when they're at a 5 or 4 or a 6, and you actually do little practices, and this is where we'll go to resilience. Resilience practice is once you've taught somebody how to find that center, once you've found a sense of regulation, then what we do is we kind of take them on little inner field trips into minor stresses, right? So we're not wanting to. Here's a image you all probably know from Inside Out, the movie, which I find to be a very profound mindfulness teaching. What we're trying to do is we're trying to get kids to have certain tools, and every kid will have a different one, right? A little stress toy, the vacuum cleaner breath, a snow globe they shake up and watch settle, mandala painting, whatever it is that's really good for them. we want them to be able to know how to find that sense of ground, that sense of centeredness. And let me just take off screen share. And so then once they have that, we want to give them this little taste of stress, right? And I'm very conscious when I do this with kids that I'm not giving them, like, I'm not going to say to kids, okay, kids, close your eyes and think of something stressful, because I have no idea what they're going to imagine, and it might totally flood their system with something that's happened. This has happened to me before when I'm teaching in schools, and yeah, I want to be very aware. I say to them, let's think of something very minorly stressful, right? Maybe your sibling or somebody annoyed you earlier a little bit, or maybe you didn't get a toy you wanted. So just giving them little examples, because we all of you and I and all kids, it's not very hard to find a stressor, right? Just look back, usually like 10 minutes. So I'm going to invite us to do one of these practices right now, if you'd practice with me. So again, I'll lead it kind of as if you're a kid, because that's the way I like to lead them. So if you can, let your eyes close. And what you're going to do is we're going to do a few vacuum cleaner breaths first, just to get a sense of stillness. And what you can do is you can just see, is the mind spinning at all? Is there any tension in the shoulders, the hands, the face? Is there any stress anywhere? And once you've found some, because I'm sure there's something there, if there's not, that's great. See if you can take a long inhale, and as if there's a vacuum in the pit of your stomach, and you're breathing it all down, sweeping it down into the vacuum, and then holding it there for 3 seconds. And then taking a nice exhale as if you're emptying down into the earth, down into the ground, and letting the air be out for a couple seconds. And then doing it again. We'll just do it a few times. A long sweeping inhale. Any stress that's left in your body, sweeping it down into the pit of the stomach, holding a few seconds, releasing it into the earth. And then I'm going to invite you to imagine something, a moment of stress that you've had recently, just a little one. So probably something from the day. Maybe there was some annoying email that came in, or a family member or colleague said something that got on your nerves. Not terrible, just something. See if you can really picture that moment. And see if you can actually, when you picture it, you imagine it, see what how your body responds. Pretty much always when there's a thought, a disgruntled thought, there's a place in the body where it's held. Maybe it's in the neck, maybe it's in the jaw. See if you can picture it a few times, kind of see what you are thinking about it, let your mind ruminate, spin for a moment, and then see where in the body does it heat up. And then let's take a few vacuum cleaner breaths. So sweeping in, down into the pit of the stomach, holding it for a few seconds, and then releasing into the earth. So again, see if you can draw in the thoughts, the stressor, the feelings in the body, and do a few more vacuum cleaner breaths, breathing it down, drawing it down, releasing it. Taking one more deep breath, letting it go. When you're ready, letting the eyes open. Would love to hear from folks. That was a short little practice, but would love to hear from you. How was that for you, or how might you imagine that be helpful for your kids or your students? You could just take yourself off mute, or you could type it into the chat bar. How did you notice? Did you notice the stress in your body? Did you notice what the vacuum cleaner breath did for you? Is this breathing activity one that breathes in through the nose and out through the mouth? Or question mark? Good question. There's different philosophies around breathing, as in everything, and as in mindfulness. I usually do, and have been, I've been taught both many ways. I usually just do in through the nose and out through the nose. Oftentimes, people do in through the nose, out through the mouth. Um, there's actually is some sense of when you're breathing out through the mouth, or when you're putting even more attention on the exhale, there's a sense of there is a drawdown. So there's an interesting phenomenon if you actually watch it in your own breath. If you put more attention on the in-breath and less on the exhale, it actually kind of elevates mood a little bit. It goes to the upper, to the hyper, and if you put more on the exhale, it goes out. And it's the same with the breathing out the mouth. There's a drawing down. Generally, with mindfulness, I just do in and out through the nose, and there's actually a lot of science around it, around mouth breathers. Generally have more stress, which is because physiologically, breathing through the mouth is what happens when you're like running from an animal. And so when people do that, some people don't sleep as well. There's different types of health issues that come for people. It's more often when they have more sleep apnea, different things when they're breathing through the mouth. And it actually can really transform people's health when you do just through the nose. But there's like a whole science around that. The visual is great for kids and adults, the vacuum cleaner breath. So I learned this from a meditation teacher of mine originally, and the image he used was a French press coffee thing, which I actually really like, kind of pressing down, filtering down. And I love coffee, so it works well for me, because I need more up, actually. I'm more of the lower realm. But the vacuum cleaner breath seems to work really good with kids and often for adults. It makes it easier to notice. It is always a nervous feeling, flutter, shaking in the left side of my stomach. Totally. So what Gary Ann is just saying there, it's really beautiful when you can subtly attune to. I'll read that one more time. It makes it easier to notice. It's always a nervous feeling, flutter, shaking in the left side of my stomach. When you can notice that, that's really beautiful mindfulness, right? And we're really trying to get that of like, oh, there's some like tension right here, or even like I can feel it almost like a shell outside of my body. That's like when you really can get, and different people who are more visual, maybe like you see it in color, or you can hear it, or you can feel it. Like there's different ways there's different learning styles, there's different mindfulness styles. But to be able to subtly kind of feel where the stress is, hold it. It's the whole idea that like you can't unclench a fist until you're aware that you're clenching it, right? And so first we're like, oh yeah, this is where it is. It feels like that. You might accentuate it a little more. When you do that, it's like when you exhale, you can release it. And so to be able to notice it that finely, right? Then you're like, oh wow, yeah, I can feel that. Let's draw it down, or let's tighten it and release it. Oftentimes I just do the much more simple practice with kids, where I just have them put all their stress into a pencil, and then as you exhale, just right? And somehow that actually is like a big release. Just to be able to be aware of the tension, let it go, right? So all these different ways. Mary Beth says, the sinking into the earth brought a noticeable calmness and a sense of letting go, right? So that is, interestingly, there's a lot of different like Taoist practices and in different practices where there's awareness of the sky, the vastness of the sky, which is more of that kind of clarity up energy, and then down into the root, which is more of this kind of earthy, grounded energy. And usually in a Taoist practice, or often in even Kabbalistic, the kind of Jewish mystical practices, the whole practice is about circulating energy and finding the center, right? Being able to have the energy up, the energy down, and us kind of swirling these energies in the middle. That's kind of the mystical form of the physiological aspect. Tracy says, I like thinking of fertilizing the earth and trees nearby me with the stuff I'm letting go of. Definitely. Right? I love that. How we are bringing the energy down. I actually literally think something like that is happening, because when we become more grounded, more slow, we pay more attention to the earth around it, we tend to the earth better, We don't go around driving and doing things as much, right? There's literally a way that we're tending the earth when we like get out of our head and into our bodies. So thank you all for sharing. Um, so I'm just repping my alpha breaths. Superhero breath. So breathe in and imagine you're a superhero. Breathe out and imagine how you will help someone. So I just wanted to use this as an example of resilience, right? We're breathing in, we're breathing out a sense. This is really what resilience is all about. We could do a couple of these. Often I do Spider-Man breath where I shoot out my web. So you breathe in, or breathe in and do Superman. So what I really like to think of in terms of resilience is that oftentimes with mindfulness we can get stuck in it just being about a kind of egoic self-help practice, and we need that. So it's not to poo-poo that, but once we have found our center, we are doing this practice because we want to be able to bring it out and to serve others in a heartfelt and right with the clarity and with groundedness, right? So we really need to remember that, and sometimes we forget it. Sometimes mindfulness-based stress reduction is just a medical intervention for us to feel better in our bodies. Again, nothing wrong with that, but I am very committed, and what I want to teach to my kids and what I want to do in schools is really about how do we take this calm and turn it into action. So the resilience practice is doing what I just did, and I do it in a lot of different ways, right? How do you find a regulation practice that works for you? And then you picture, right? Picture a stressful situation, somebody that annoys you. How do you bring your heart to them, right? And you do a lot of practices where you titrate back and forth. Okay, feel the calm. Okay, now picture that person who annoys you so much that you had such a bad argument, that colleague, that principal who said whatever. Okay, now picture what they said. Now see if you can stay grounded, stay in your heart. Okay, and as doing that practice day in and day out, then of course you're going to have to practice it over and over again because it's going to come up in real life. But you're going to be kind of literally linking the neural pathways. When it happens, you go, oh, okay, bring it in, right? So once we have built those muscles, right, the resilience muscles, then we get to what I want to really get into is this third R of mindfulness. Again, regulation, resilience, realization. So realization, revelation, whatever we want to call it. For me, what this is about is around the idea of understanding the systems that we are nested within. Mindfulness is a practice when you take it all the way to the root. We are becoming deeply aware of ourselves and deeply aware of the world and the interconnection between the inner and the outer, or actually that there is no difference between the inner and the outer. And you're really opening your heart and your mind and your body to your understanding that your body is the earth, your body is the cosmos, your mind is culture, your culture is your mind, really opening up to a much wider and more fascinating thing. So I want to talk for a moment about one of the ways that I'm doing this, transformational mindfulness. Actually, let's cut back here and I'll just chat about it. So transformational mindfulness, what I think of as transformational mindfulness is really recognizing that one of my colleagues, David Treleaven, who teaches around trauma and mindfulness, he has a book called, it'll come to me in a moment, mindfulness-based, it'll come to me in a moment.
Just trauma-sensitive.
Trauma-sensitive mindfulness, thank you so much. Hopefully he'll still be my friend after I mess that up. So trauma-sensitive mindfulness, one of the things he talks about in there, which I love, is he talks about how mindfulness, if we're not aware of our bodies, if we're not aware relationally, and if we're not aware of ourselves nested in a cultural context, then we're not doing it in a trauma-sensitive way, right? So if we're practicing mindfulness and we're just using it in order to kind of disconnect, it can actually be dissociative on some level. And some people really find that. There's a way that people have practiced for 20 years, but then, something intense happens. This is very often has happened to me and happened to many people. If you do like a 10-day meditation retreat, you're incredibly calm. Then you go out and like your brother says one thing to you and you're like, God, all of a sudden that, where did that calm go, right? Where did that resilience go? There's a way that we are able to find this little pocket of calm. But if we're not really thinking like, okay, how does my calmness, how does my mindfulness practice link up to what's happening ecologically, right? How does this link up to social justice, and how does this link up to what's happening politically and the fragmentation that's happening in our culture? If my mindfulness practice is just my own little kind of like island where I block everybody out, then it's not real mindfulness, because your awareness is not actually going outside of your own little head. So transformational mindfulness is when we really extend. That resilience goes all the way. There's a lot of folks who, beautiful quotes around how our circle of care, our circle of compassion, right? When we are limiting our circle of compassion to just ourselves or just our family or even just our community, it's a lack of mindfulness, right? It's a lack of capacity to be able to see more widely and recognize all humans, all animals, everybody is me and is within my field of compassion. So it's actually a really kind of radical and difficult path, the path of mindfulness, if you actually are able to open yourself to recognizing. This is why, a lot of Buddhists are vegetarians, or you go to the Jains, who is an amazing religion in India, where they like brush away ants in front of them as they're walking because they so don't want to hurt anybody. A little extreme, but it gets to that point when you're really developing this compassionate awareness and you're thinking, oh my, I feel the pain of this being. I don't want to have to. How do I live in such a way that I don't inflict pain? So it leads you to live on some level a completely different life when you're going to that level of transformation and you're asking big questions, right? You're asking very big questions. Extending the circle of compassion, totally. Just reading a little side note. So one of the ways that I'm doing this is, I'm going to skip over a couple slides and come back. So transformative educational leadership. This is, Tracy mentioned transformative educational leadership for a moment. This is an organization directed by Meena Srinivasan that I helped found with Linda Lantieri and Hector Montenegro and Janice Jackson and a lot of amazing educators, a lot of whom have been superintendents of large school systems. And what we are doing is my path in this whole field really has been, I started teaching mindfulness, and as Tracy said, with Mindful Schools almost 15 years ago in Oakland schools, and realized, okay, the teachers and parents really are the ones who need this to be able to create an environment for the kids. And then I realized, oh man, we really need the stress flows downhill. We need to get the principals and the superintendents. So I've been working the last few years. We bring in groups of the last cohort was 70 participants, a lot of principals and superintendents, and we're really working with them to incorporate mindfulness, so there's four main threads: mindfulness, social emotional learning, equity, and leadership. And this year we have 60% leaders of color, and we have this very deep commitment and understanding of how are we looking at educational systems and not just teaching mindfulness to them, but creating mindful systems, looking at the way that we teach, looking at the structures that we create. And my real belief is that if we truly open our hearts, truly open our minds, and look at the way that we're teaching, we are going to do it completely differently. Because at the moment, our education system is very stress-inducing. So I really don't, we don't want to be coming in and into a stress inducing situation and then just getting kids to calm down where they're going to get stressed again. We're just going to calm them down and stressed. We want to actually create the conditions within which, and that takes so much work. And so we're wrestling with it. And this is where discussion can happen with all of us, because I have a lot of ideas. I'm doing a lot of work. I'm inspired by so many people who are doing profound things, but I don't know how to fix this, right? I don't know how to fix the larger ecological issues. I don't know how to fix the education system. And I know so many people who are, including you, because you're on this call, who want this change, right? Who want the larger transformation to happen. But we're in it together. And oftentimes, after a whole year of what often happens is the leaders in the organization, most of what they're taking is they're doing their own practice, because they're like, I am so stressed. I just need that first R. And then once they get through, they're doing a lot of curriculum and understanding, but a lot of them have said to me really honestly, like, we've budged a little bit, even though I'm the superintendent, like mostly like through osmosis, I'm more calm and some of my principals are more calm and it's happening a little bit, but like trying to shift policy and do all these things is Herculean. So I realized my time and I really wanted to get questions. So I'm going to actually just say one more thing, even though I had like 10 more slides and other things I wanted to talk about. Actually, I'll show this one slide as part of it. During a pandemic and during fires and everything, one of the profound things about it, and I don't want to make it a silver lining things because people are dying and it's nobody wants what's happening, but during collapses, and this is, I'll show this one slide around, this is something that is, I find very fascinating around adaptive systems. So this actually is something that comes from ecology, and it's a cycle that usually happens in natural systems, a lake, a forest, where you have these natural systems where there's conservation, where something is kind of like stable, and then it releases, and then it reorganizes, and then it grows. And generally in organic systems, this happens. This happens in bodies. This happens with the sun going, right? This is natural systems all pretty much have the same thing. As an example of how these systems are kind of messed up, and what happens is the forests where I live, one of the reasons that climate change is a big part of it, but one of the reasons they're so bad right now is that fires for thousands of years, for hundreds of thousands of years, have been part of this natural system. And for 200 years, the government has tried to stop all fires. And so there's this massive growth of timber and fuel in the fires, which make these catastrophic fires. And there's a lot of indigenous folks and a lot of, very forward-looking people who are doing controlled burning and working the way that Native people always did, where they would follow these natural cycles. Every year, every 3 years, they would do these light burns through the forest, which would create all of this. Is actually like working with natural systems, which grow and then fall apart and then grow again. And it's the same that's happening in our economic system, where GDP growth has to just grow forever. And there's a lot of ways that our education systems, there's a lot of ways that our systems have a lot of fuel in them, because they haven't been able to, the systems that are in place are the same systems that have been there for a very long time. They haven't been able to reorganize. And so what happens in a pandemic is our education system, though everybody I always talk to says, yeah, our education system is broken, but what do we do? Because we haven't let things kind of fall apart. And at the moment, if you've noticed, they're kind of falling apart. And that's not good, obviously, for all the people who are out of work and for kids who aren't in school. Like this, I'm not at all saying this is good. But what does happen is in something of a collapse, there's a reorganization. And in that reorganization, social emotional learning, mindfulness, all these things that have been kind of listened to but kind of fringe, all of a sudden they like a plant in an ecological system that can't get a footing only usually gets a footing once there is a fire or once there's a collapse. And then new plants can grow within it. So right now, there's all of these reasons that we should be on some level more inspired as educators trying to create change, because this is a moment we're saying this is terrible and we all know that something needs to change. Let's do this, right? Let's figure this out together. On some level the slate is clear. All of a sudden people are saying like, well, maybe we can do it all online, or we can do it like that, or maybe I have all these friends who all of a sudden putting kids in homeschools, and like it's all up in the air. So how do we come together to reorganize using mindfulness, using emotional intelligence, using all of these different conscious educational paradigms that we've known we've needed to do for a long time, but things have been so kind of stuck that they haven't been able to get in there. Rodrigo is saying, Daniel, are you aware of the C learning program from Emory? Any comments on that? They put engagement at the base part from a place of compassion. So yes, Rodrigo, awesome. The C learning is a really, Brendan Ozawa, what's his full name? Who's one of the people leading that, Brendan Ozawa de Silva.
I want to announce quickly that Brendan's going to be on at the end of October. As our
perfect. It's all coming together. Brendan's amazing. Wonderful that you got him on. And Linda Lentieri, who's one of my main colleagues, has been seminal in that. And they've made all their curriculum free online, and it's awesome. I would highly recommend going and checking it out. I think that there's a lot of, by the way, my whole curriculum I've given, if you go to mindfuleducation.com, during COVID times, I've made it free. So if you put in 2020 into the coupon code, you'll get it for free. I think that is very much a good thing that C Learning is doing, and I heard Tracy saying that also. Like, of course, we as organizations need to function, so we need money, but also we know what people are struggling with. So as she said, nobody is turned away, right? People need help right now. I would love to open it up for some conversation, some questions, some discussion around how we can do this. What are the things we need to plant right now when things are falling apart? What are the things that need to be transformed? How can mindfulness and social emotional learning help? What questions do you have for me? What ideas do you have? And I think people can just take themselves off mute, right? Or you can just type in a question.
Yeah, take yourself off mute.
Or Tracy, if you have any comments or ideas here.
No, that the last bit that you're talking about is, someone even said they'll stay on longer. They want to hear everything you want to share. So
okay, good.
There's other things that you were excited to share with us. People know that they'll be able to see the recording if they have to hop off.
Okay. So
Maybe I can, while people are getting their questions together, I love in your book how you actually do a little history of mindful education in it and talk about the work you've done with Linda Lentieri and Daniel Goleman. But so you were inspired to ask them, this is a long time ago, what role mindfulness could play in the future of education. And you're asking this to like these co-founders of CASTLE. The answer was clear. They discussed the core competencies of SEL and went on to explain how mindfulness practices are the best ways to cultivate these competencies. Siegel gave a synthesis of everything we had been saying about SEL and mindfulness in one word: integration. So I just like that word integration. And then having you then talk about how this connected and
yeah. Totally. Yeah, that was at a mindfulness and education conference, which this is the first year that didn't happen in whatever, I think we'd done 11 years of it. And that was the first year, I think, and we had all those folks in the faculty room. And that CASTLE has really integrated a lot of mindfulness now into what they're doing as a kind of underpinning, as a foundation of how to cultivate the different aspects of the different social emotional learning competencies, seeing that in order, the whole idea that like you can tell your kids to be nice to each other, but how do you actually cultivate that inner quality, and doing a contemplative practice where you're picturing yourself caring for somebody, and that there's actually ways to foster those, has really panned out. The social emotional learning movement has really been able to integrate that a lot. Folks like Mark Brackett and other people have really put that into kind of central aspect of their larger curriculum.
Were there any other slides you wanted to share with us? We want to see all.
Sure. Anybody ideas? Anything folks want to plant in the new garden of post-pandemic, if that ever happens, or questions around this?
Just a note that, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can.
So I teach in Newark, Delaware, and our school has embraced compassionate, trauma-informed, compassionate type of community. And so it's connect before content. So we went through 2 years of training. And in our third year, we changed our student code of conduct. So we had permission from the district to pilot. So instead of going directly to the code of conduct, which is, the in-school suspensions, out-of-school suspensions, we built 9 steps of doing circles for not just connecting with community, but also as a way to recognize the harm and then repair the harm that they may have caused by their actions or reactions to a situation. And so we had a big drop in our in-school suspension and out-of-school suspension. So now our students are spending more time. This year, we're focusing more on the inequities that we may have from our biases, whether it's conscious or not. And so we're really excited about taking on our 4th year to really take a look at even the curriculum resources that are typically are white privilege or white children or white, not as diverse, even though our population is very, very diverse. So we're taking a look to see is how can we bridge that gap, because our tests are continuing to show that that there is a gap in our achievement. And so we're starting to go down that path, but our district has now adopted our 9 steps before we go into the, to the more rigid disciplines. So that is a start. It's not perfect, but it is the building of community and also trying to make sure that everyone feels as though they are part of it, and we want them, and we're very forgiving, but we still set our rules saying that that's not okay and have those hard conversations.
Beautiful. Mary Beth, have you figured out how to do that virtually? Or are you guys doing virtual schooling?
So what we're doing is we do have our tier students, and that we are working to make sure that we have connectivity time where it's a smaller group. So it's not just the big class setting. So we are looking at ways on how can we connect with them, even if it's just the mentoring via Zoom with a parent on, and continuing our discussion on how are you feeling, what's going on, and so that we do have that dialogue going on and familiar faces. But yeah, the 2D is definitely difficult, and we're exploring ways to do that.
And someone had a question for you, Mary Beth. They asked, they said, thanks for sharing. And what level of schooling? Is it primary or secondary that you're?
We're kindergarten through 5th. So we have a lot of unregulated emotions they don't even understand. So we use zones of regulation to teach them and help identify what they're feeling too. So that can be a little helpful. So we have emojis throughout our classrooms so that they can identify. So we can just say, I understand that you are upset or whatever, and give them a chance to chill. And we have chill zones in every single teaching space. every single one. And they do have, like you mentioned at the beginning, their little stress relief, whether it's a ball, we do the breathing. We still are always, it's always starting over every year to make sure that everybody's on the same page. And we've also brought in parents into our conflict resolution too, in our circles. We do circles with parents anytime we get together with, well, last year, like a PTA meeting, we would do some type of connectivity circle so that we're building our community. It's not just with our student to student and teacher to student, it's also with the parents, and they love it. And bus drivers, cafeteria, everybody.
I love it. That's the systemic aspect. Like, it sounds like that's really heartening to hear, and I hear more and more folks. I've had the less heartening experience where different schools and school systems ask me to come and help to integrate mindfulness, and sometimes the communities, and I'm sure it hasn't been easy, but Mary Beth, but what you're naming is this kind of full-scale systemic transformation around compassion, right? How do we get the parents, how do we get the teachers and the students, and actually create rooms so the actual, like the architecture, you know what I mean? Like, how do we create a whole space, rather than sometimes when I'm called in, folks will say, basically they're wanting a behavioral modification for kids. Like, how do we just get the kids to calm down? And usually I'll say, like, if you're willing for me to teach the teachers and the administrators for the first year and not even talk about the kids, then I'll sign on, and we'll actually talk about how to create a less stressed, more compassionate atmosphere. And a lot of some schools and school systems are game, and that's beautiful when you really hear, like, yes, let's do this work together. I come from a psychology background, and in psychology it's called the identified patient, which is like there's always one, the one of the kids in the family is the one that is the sore thumb, that it's his fault, right? But when you go in and actually do family therapy, it's like, oh yeah, the parents are fighting, and there's like, the whole system has to be examined. So if we're just saying, yeah, the kids are hyper, how do we calm them down? We need to look inside of ourselves. We need to look in, as you're saying, Mary Beth, we need to look in the history of schooling and the way that schools were set up and the way that testing is and the way that there's a much larger, and there's a lot, there's a lot of big transformational questions happening right now. People talking about defunding police and talking about decolonizing different. For me, it's whatever you believe about it. It's a potent moment to be able to ask those questions, right? Asking the larger question around schooling of how do we do schooling, rather than how do we band-aid schooling and let's get the kids to calm down in the midst of schooling. Like these much larger inquiries. Wow, what are we doing here? How often should kids be in school? How much testing should we have? I went to Finland and was doing a bunch of teaching there. And I was invited by a researcher who does a lot of research around social emotional learning and mindfulness. And I asked her, I said, why, because Finland is known as being like the highest testing, and simultaneously kids are in school less. There's almost no testing. Kids are totally not as stressed. This is an amazing education system. And I said, how do you all do it? And she said, we do it because we actually use mostly the research that is done in America, but we actually like do it. And it's Finland's a small country. It's a small homogenous country. Decisions are made much more easily and seamlessly. America is really hard. Policy is, we know how insane it is, right? So, but they're like, yeah, we did research and it showed that homework until fifth grade is not actually helpful for the kids. So we stopped giving it to them. They're like, oh my God, what a relief. Like to actually just be able to follow the research, and the kids are less stressed. They're actually doing better in school. We have a lot of the research. We just don't. And now the hope is that we're going to be able to use some of it and actually make those transformations. So Mary Beth said, yes, with 3 tiers of questions, restorative practices is where we started to build our community. Beautiful. And Tracy says, someone asked about clock hours for this, not for this individual event, but members can earn 24 CEs. Beautiful. Do you want to say something about that?
No, I mean, that's the basics of it, that
No.
we put all, like, the recording of this will be on our member site. And then and then we also obviously have it recorded that you were at the Zoom event. So in May, anybody who would like those clock hours for processing fee of $30 can get those. But I do see, like, Mary Beth had asked, Kathy had a question for Mary Beth about the connectivity circle that I think she tried to answer in that. But Mary Beth, is there anything else that you maybe could share about your connectivity circle?
So the connectivity circle is just, it's a getting to know each other first. Their likes, their dislikes, their favorites, their places they go. It's very open-ended, not threatening. Those are tier 1. And so there's low risk. And when we do the circle, if someone is not willing to share, you can just say pass. But we also have our circle rules that you say just enough to be heard, because you have your lovely Gabby Gusses that want to take over the whole thing and are full of details with what everybody wore and how their hair was, etc. So we do have that, and that we respect others' contribution, and that we have circles that are sequential. So when somebody raises their hand to start it, then they have to decide if the circle's going to the right or left. Or you can have non-sequential, where you pass an object. For us, because obviously I'm not a tiger, but that is our mascot. So we have a little tiger that they might pass from one to another, taking turns when they come to the center of the circle to do the pass. So it's a little ceremonious too. And if they do pass, we do come back and ask them if they would like to contribute. And if they say no, that's fine. We don't force it, because it's awkward for some children to be able to speak in front of a group. We have several children that are self-mute, so we don't push it. And sometimes they'll talk to a friend and then be able to share. But this way we build a sense of it's okay to speak, and that they find out each other's likes and dislikes, and they understand, even with emotions, and we start bringing our tier 2, which is a little bit higher risk. How do you feel about whatever? When you get angry, what do you prefer? Do you prefer people with you, or do you like your space? So when we do have students who are getting upset, they know, don't say anything to them, because that's not helpful, and you're being respectful if you don't say anything. And where the other child may be the ones like, yeah, they just want you to sit next to them. So we kind of help with, they get to learn that there's comfort, but it's not a one size fits all. And so it does. And then the tier 3 is obviously where we're repairing any harm. And, how do you think so-and-so feels when you're throwing a chair? I'm being, I'm really bringing it out there, or that the paper, their artwork and their classroom work that's been posted for all to see has been torn down by you. What do you think? And then what has happened is we have found that we don't need to decide what their quote punishment should be. A lot of times they're the ones that's saying, well, do you think I could tape it and put it back up? Do you think I could redo, or I'll set the room back up? And that's actually part of their restorative practice, but they're doing it on their own. So for them to organically come up with that is where we want to be. They understand that they want to repair the community and the harm that they brought.
So beautiful. But I love the way that, because you're empowering them to be able to again, the whole idea of, instead of needing to regulate the students, teaching them their own self-regulation, teaching them how to be able to have their own compassion rather than forcing them to do it.
Exactly. It's teach them how to fish, right?
Teach them how to fish. I am aware of time, and I want to end us with a quote, and then let you all have your evening. You've given me lovely attention, and I so appreciate it, and I so appreciate you, Tracy, giving me the opportunity. I'm going to share this screen one more time. So this is a quote that I've been really appreciating from Ruth King, beautiful book called Mindful of Race, which I'd highly recommend. And she says, simply stated, in relative reality, we are some bodies, formed, habituated, ego-driven, and relating to life through concepts. In ultimate reality, we are nobodies, formless, empty of self, and eternal. In relative reality, I am a woman and African American, lesbian, great-grandmother, artist, and elder. However, in ultimate reality, I am none of these things. I am beyond conception. I am awareness, dancing with the karmic rhythms of life. In ultimate reality, there is neither race or a reason to suffer. We are undivided and beyond definition. But in relative reality, we are all in considerable pain as racially diverse beings driven by fear, hatred, greed, and delusion. The reason I wanted to read that is it feels like it kind of, I was just seeing that quote today, and it was hitting me for the three R's, specifically that first R where it is on regulation, and that last one on realization. For me, the realization on some level is this ultimate level where we are all souls, we are all doing this, existing phenomenon that none of us exactly understand together, and there's an aspect of mindfulness practice and of what we're doing, which is tapping into the universal aspect that is in me, the universal aspect that is in you, regardless of skin, regardless of politics, regardless of anything. And then there's a on the ground real experience that if we're just trying to meditate and feel happy all the time, we're not actually being honest with what's happening with different people and different amounts of wealth and different ecological issues that are truly making it hard for me to live where I'm living, and climate refugees moving from this place to that. There's a lot of very intense things happening in our world, and we need to use our compassion, our presence, to look at them in the eye and to work to make things more just and more healthy, and to hold those simultaneously, which is a profound thing to do, to recognize we are all souls here figuring it out on some spiritual level, and we are human bodies born into certain situations with certain privileges and how do we do that at once? So I want to have a hope that you can figure out how to balance those within yourself, integrate them within yourself, and to be able to remember your soul self and everybody else's soul selves while simultaneously really working for your schools and your communities and families and taking care of each other. So thank you, Tracy, so much for your time. And again, if you want to, my Mindful Education, which is where I have my online program, if you put in 2020, that my entire curriculum training is free for you and anybody else you want to share that with. So thank you all so much. Have a lovely, lovely evening.
That's amazing. Thank you, Daniel.